There was a time when love felt urgent. You felt like time was chasing you, like you needed to find the right person soon, soon before everyone else moved ahead, soon before you fell behind, soon before you became the woman who waited too long. And that pressure lived quietly inside you, not always loud, but always present. A subtle anxiety whenever a relationship ended, a subtle fear whenever something promising didn't work out, a quiet voice asking, what if that was my chance? What if I missed it? What if I don't meet someone again? So when someone new appeared, your nervous system did something automatic. It accelerated. You paid closer attention. You invested faster. You hoped harder. Because urgency creates attachment quickly, not necessarily healthy attachment, but emotional investment, driven by fear of loss. And for a long time, that urgency felt normal. It felt like passion, like chemistry, like excitement, like the thrill of possibility. But something changed, slowly, quietly, almost without you noticing. At first, you stopped feeling rushed, not because you stopped wanting love, but because love stopped feeling like a race. The timeline that once lived in your mind began dissolving. You no longer felt that panicked voice telling you this has to work. You stopped forcing connections to move faster than they naturally should. You stopped interpreting every promising interaction as a potential future you had to secure. And that shift is one of the clearest signs of emotional security developing inside you. Because urgency in love is rarely about love itself. It's about fear, fear of being alone, fear of missing out, fear that the opportunity might disappear. But when secure attachment begins forming within you, that fear loses its control. You stop approaching love like something scarce. You begin approaching it like something that requires alignment. And alignment cannot be rushed. It reveals itself over time, through behavior, through consistency, through emotional availability, not through urgency. So when you notice that you no longer feel desperate to make things work, that is not a sign that your heart is closing. It is a sign your nervous system is finally calming down. The urgency that once pushed you to hold on too tightly is being replaced with something healthier: discernment, patience, choice. Because secure love does not grow from pressure, it grows from compatibility. That proves itself over time. And the moment you realize this, love stops feeling like a race you must win and starts feeling like something you can choose carefully. For a long time, urgency in love felt romantic. Movies glorified it. Stories celebrated it. Two people meet, and everything moves quickly. Intense conversations, constant messaging, late nights, immediate emotional closeness. It feels electric, exciting, alive. And because it feels powerful, we often interpret that intensity as chemistry, as destiny, as proof that something rare is happening. But intensity and emotional safety are not the same thing. In fact, urgency often grows from the opposite of security. It grows from uncertainty. When someone's attention is inconsistent, your nervous system becomes hyper-aware. You start wondering when they will text again, when you'll see them next, whether they feel the same way. That uncertainty creates emotional tension, and tension can feel a lot like passion. Your mind stays focused on the connection. Your body feels alert. Your thoughts keep returning to the same person. And because the feeling is intense, it becomes easy to believe that it must mean something special. But what many people are actually experiencing is not deep compatibility. It's nervous system activation. Your brain begins chasing resolution. You want clarity. You want reassurance. You want the relationship to stabilize. So you invest more energy, more attention, more emotional effort, not because the connection is necessarily healthy, but because the uncertainty pulls you in. And the longer that cycle continues, the more urgency becomes attached to the relationship. You feel like you must make it work. You feel like you must secure the connection. You feel like losing it would mean losing something rare. But when emotional maturity begins to develop, you start noticing something very different. Calm connections begin to feel more attractive. People who communicate clearly, people who show up consistently, people whose actions match their words. At first, that kind of stability can almost feel unfamiliar. There's no dramatic uncertainty, no emotional guessing games, no sudden disappearances, followed by intense returns. Everything feels steady, predictable, grounded, and for someone who once equated intensity with love, that calmness can feel confusing. At first, you might wonder, where are the butterflies? Why doesn't this feel overwhelming? Why does it feel so easy? But that ease is often the first sign that your nervous system is finally relaxing, because healthy connection doesn't need constant stimulation to stay alive. It grows through trust, through reliability, through emotional presence. And when you experience that, something inside you shifts. You stop craving the chaos that once felt exciting. You stop chasing people who create emotional highs and lows. You start appreciating the quiet stability that allows you to actually feel safe. And safety changes everything. Because when you feel safe, you don't feel urgent. You don't feel pressured to secure someone's affection as quickly as possible. You don't feel like the connection could disappear at any moment. Instead, you allow relationships to unfold naturally. You watch how someone behaves. Over time, you observe their patterns. You see how they handle conflict. You see whether their interest remains steady. And through that process, love stops being something you rush toward. It becomes something you evaluate, something you choose carefully. And that is the quiet transformation that many women experience without realizing it. Urgency fades, not because love became less important, but because your nervous system no longer mistakes intensity for connection. The moment urgency disappears, something surprising takes its place. Choice, real choice, not the kind of choice that feels pressured by time, not the kind of choice that comes from fear of losing someone, but a quiet, grounded awareness that you get to decide who enters your life. For a long time, love may have felt like something that simply happened to you. You met someone, feelings appeared, chemistry grew, and suddenly, you were emotionally invested before you even understood whether the connection was truly right for you. It felt automatic, like attraction itself was making the decision. And because those emotions arrived quickly, everything else followed quickly too. You opened your heart fast. You imagined possibilities fast. You attached your hope to the relationship before it had time to reveal its true shape. That pattern is incredibly common when urgency is present, because urgency speeds up emotional investment. But when secure attachment begins developing inside you, something changes. You slow down, not out of fear, but out of awareness. You begin understanding that attraction alone is not enough information to make a life decision. You realize That chemistry can exist without compatibility. That excitement can exist without emotional safety. That attention can exist without real intention. And that realization reshapes the way you approach love. Instead of asking, do they like me? You begin asking, do I actually like who they are? Instead of wondering, will this turn into a relationship? You start observing, is this person someone I respect? Instead of trying to secure their affection, you start evaluating their character, their emotional maturity, their consistency, their values. And that shift creates a powerful calm. Because when you are choosing rather than chasing, you are no longer operating from scarcity. You are operating from discernment. Scarcity says, this might be my only chance. Discernment says, this might be one option among many. Scarcity creates pressure. Discernment creates clarity. And clarity changes the entire emotional tone of dating. You stop feeling anxious about whether someone will stay. You become curious about whether they belong in your life at all. That curiosity creates space, space to observe, space to listen to your intuition, space to notice how someone behaves over time. And when you give yourself that space, something fascinating happens. You start seeing people more clearly because urgency often blurs perception. When we feel rushed to secure love, we focus on potential instead of patterns. We focus on moments instead of consistency. We focus on hope instead of behavior. But when urgency disappears, your vision sharpens. You notice how someone treats others. You notice whether their words align with their actions. You notice how they handle disappointment or disagreement. You notice whether their emotional presence remains steady or fluctuates. These observations cannot happen when everything moves too fast. They require time, and secure attachment is comfortable with time. It doesn't panic in the waiting. It doesn't feel threatened by the pace of reality, because deep down, you no longer believe that love is something you must capture quickly before it disappears. You understand that the right connection will not vanish simply because you took time to understand it. In fact, the right connection often grows stronger when you move slowly, because real compatibility reveals itself through ordinary moments, through daily interaction, through small choices, repeated consistently over time. And once you begin living from that understanding, the urgency culture around love starts losing its influence over you. The constant messages that say, find someone now. Don't wait too long. Don't be too selective. Don't miss your chance. Those messages begin sounding different. They begin sounding like noise because your internal compass has changed direction. Instead of racing toward love, you are calmly observing it. And that calmness is one of the clearest signs that your emotional world is becoming more secure. At some point, you notice something subtle. You are no longer rushing to define the connection. There was a time when that question sat quietly in the back of your mind. Where is this going? What are we becoming? Are we moving forward or wasting time? And those questions often appeared quickly, sometimes after only a few interactions, sometimes after only a few weeks. Because when urgency drives love, certainty feels necessary. As soon as possible, you want reassurance, you want clarity, you want confirmation that the emotional energy you are investing is leading somewhere stable. But when your attachment becomes more secure, that pressure begins. to dissolve, not because you stopped valuing commitment, but because you stopped forcing certainty before understanding. You allow things to unfold. You allow conversations to happen naturally. You allow the connection to reveal itself instead of trying to secure it immediately. This change can feel almost unfamiliar at first because the emotional rhythm of your relationships becomes calmer. You are no longer constantly analyzing every signal. You are no longer reading deeply into every delay or every silence. You are no longer measuring the relationship against an invisible timeline in your mind. Instead, you simply observe. You notice how someone shows up. You notice how they speak about their life. You notice how they respond to your boundaries. You notice how they behave when things don't go smoothly. These moments reveal far more than early declarations ever could, because real compatibility is not proven through excitement. It is proven through stability, through the ability to handle ordinary life together, through emotional presence when things are imperfect, through effort that continues even after the novelty fades. When you begin noticing these things, something inside you starts relaxing. You realize that love does not need to happen all at once. It does not need to explode into existence to be real. In fact, the healthiest connections often develop quietly. They grow through familiarity, through trust built slowly, through small moments that accumulate over time. There is no dramatic rush, no emotional roller coaster, just two people gradually discovering whether their lives actually align. And when you reach this stage, the fear of missing out on love begins fading because you realize something important. Love that requires urgency often cannot sustain long-term stability. It burns bright, but struggles to remain steady. But love that grows slowly has room to build foundations, shared values, mutual respect, emotional reliability. And those foundations are what make relationships last. Once you understand this, you stop feeling threatened by time. You stop worrying that waiting will somehow ruin your chances at love. You stop believing that every promising connection must be secured immediately. Instead, you start trusting that the right person will not disappear simply because you allowed the relationship to develop naturally. The right person will appreciate that pace because they are not looking for urgency either. They are looking for something real, something steady, something that grows from understanding rather than pressure. And when you meet someone who moves at that same pace, something surprising happens. You feel calm instead of anxious, curious instead of pressured, present instead of worried about the future. And in that calm space, love finally has room to become authentic, not rushed, not forced, not driven by fear, but chosen by two people who are no longer in a hurry. Love stops feeling like something you need to secure and starts feeling like something you are free to choose. For a long time, urgency may have shaped your relationships. If someone showed interest, you felt pressure to respond quickly. If a connection seemed promising, you felt pressure to protect it. If someone pulled away, you felt pressure to hold on. That pressure often disguised itself as passion, but in reality, it was fear guiding your decisions. Fear that the opportunity might disappear. Fear that love might not come again. Fear that waiting would leave you behind. But once your nervous system begins maturing emotionally. That fear loosens its grip. You begin realizing that love cannot be secured through urgency. It can only be revealed through time, through consistent behavior, through shared experiences, through the gradual discovery of whether two lives actually align. And when you understand this, you stop rushing the beginning of relationships. You stop forcing clarity before it naturally appears. You stop attaching your sense of future to someone you barely know yet. Instead, you allow reality to unfold. You watch how someone moves through the world. You see how they treat people when nothing is being gained. You observe whether their words remain consistent with their actions. You notice whether they grow when challenges appear. These things cannot be discovered quickly. They require patience. And patience is something urgency never allowed you to have. But now you have it, because love is no longer a race. Inside your mind, you are no longer measuring your life against someone else's timeline. You are no longer wondering whether time is running out. Instead, you are living in a different emotional reality, one where love is not something you chase. It is something you evaluate, something you welcome when it proves itself through presence and consistency. And that calmness is one of the clearest signs that secure attachment has taken root inside you. You no longer feel desperate to make a connection work. You no longer feel compelled to hold on to people who cannot meet you where you are, because deep down, you understand something that once felt impossible to trust. The right relationship will not require urgency to survive. It will grow naturally because both people are choosing it with clarity. And when you reach that level of peace, love stops feeling like a pressure the world placed on you. It starts feeling like a decision you are free to make when the connection is truly right. If this message resonated with you, then you may already be experiencing that quiet transformation, the moment when love stopped feeling urgent and started feeling intentional. And if that shift is happening in your life, you're not becoming distant. You're becoming secure. Secure enough to wait for something real. Secure enough to choose carefully. Secure enough to know that the right connection does not require rushing. If this perspective spoke to you, stay with us here at Depth of Us, because this space is for women who are no longer chasing love, but learning how to recognize it when it truly appears.